Jadhav sir. Let me tell you that it's an absolute honor to be talking to you. You've been in the industry for the longest time, I mean for over 3 decades, which is why I've come to you today. The market can be especially tricky for startups and SMBs that are out there that are just entering into the market, right? So my first question to you, sir, is that, what are some of the key challenges that startups and SMEs entering into the market face, and how can they overcome these challenges?
Thank you for the interview. When you talk about markets and the key challenges, the markets have their own mechanism of running, and they factor in all the information. So if someone says that someone knows more than the markets, I would disagree. So neither I or anyone else can know more than the markets themselves. And going to the markets have been doing well because Indian and foreigners both feel that India's economy is doing well and we will do further well. The markets have done well. I think because the markets are doing well, there are many promoters who are coming forward and listing their own companies. And that's a good sign. It shows the confidence in the Indian economy. And it also means that the companies are ready to disclose. Once they listed, they'd have to disclose lots of things. They're ready to disclose and work transparently. That brings a lot of clarity the way India is going.
So, sir, thank you for that great insight, into the market. And now I'd like to come to the cash flow aspect of it. I mean, we hear of less than 5% of startups succeeding past their first year. And one of the main reasons is that they don't know how to manage the cash flow. So what advice would you give to startups and SMB on managing their finances and cash flow to ensure sustainable growth?
First of all, it's not the cash flows only that kill the SMEs that die. It is a standard thing of the world that any person or any entity that is born will meet its death. In startups, we found that many times the ideas are good or sometimes the ideas are not good. So some startups fail because of the ideas. Second, some startups fail because of the execution. Similarly, many of them grow to become a small company or a medium-sized company, but then they fail. Cash flow is one of the most significant aspects for failure, but it's also the promoter's mind or the way it works. Because when they start, the promoter is doing everything from marketing to sales to execution to compliances to handling finances and getting things running. But once the size goes to a certain level, the promoter has to get its team. So we found most of the times the startups or the companies fail not because of cash flows, but because of the way the promoters think. And they do not want to spend money on building a team. You'll see that most of the successful startups or SMEs are those which have a team which is big and they see the hope of the company growing much faster. So I think it's better that they build a team. It's better that the promoter delegates the job, and that's a hard task to learn. So when I mentor organizations, I have found in more than half the cases, or rather most of the cases, it's the promoter requires to de-link from the company to a certain extent and delegate it to capable people. So sometimes we feel that the people that they take are not as capable because either the costs are higher or the capable people do not want to join you because they can't see a big future in you, or the promoter feels that they will challenge their thinking. I think those companies which get people who can challenge the promoter well, who can actually complement the promoter's skills and think it's a own company. So for which there is a good scheme that you can give ESOPs, though many times unless you list, the money will not be given. I know of a case, or rather many cases, but one of the cases I'll highlight is where an unlisted company, they took initial employees and at a senior level, and those who joined even at the mid-level, they gave them some ESOPs. After a couple of years, when they vested, not only did the promoter value the company fairly, and the people never thought that the ESOPs that they will get will be more than 10 years of their salary at that time. And so many people realize that the valuation is growing so fast, we will only encash a certain part of the ESOPs and let the others remain. So they were wedded to the company. And my advising the company since its beginning was a great thing, because not only did I support them, but I also learned that promoters can make a company larger and bigger and give more scope to the people by doing this.
And one more thing that startups often struggle with is with the regulatory landscape in India. Regulatory landscape is changing every single day, and there is a new compliance that they need to keep up with. Very often. The latest is the DPDP Act that everybody is talking about. So, what would you guide them? How can like startups and SMBs navigate the regulatory landscape in India to ensure compliance and avoid legal pitfalls?
Well, let me give the simpler answer first regarding the DPDP Act. DPDP Act is actually a sunrise act which you require to have due to change in technology. I think the government is sensible enough to not make it a roller coaster ride, but they will bring in the provisions one by one or regular periodic inputs. The bigger part of the DPDP Act is applicable to the large companies or established companies. The startups and smaller companies need not worry. But I am sure that they have to start doing it now. Otherwise, the penalties are huge. 250 crore rupees per incident is going to be a big issue. And I'm sure the board members also are interested in knowing what's happening. So DPDP Act is not such an issue. In fact, it's given lots of young people and to understand more about how technology. Regarding compliances, if the company is going to grow and they are going to do something better, I'm sure that they require to know compliances. If they are going to get listed, they are going to use other people's money. They have to disclose, the norms have to be followed, and they cannot play a game as if it's their home game. So compliances are here to stay. There are lots of advisors available. There are lots of technical inputs available where you can just put in what compliances are required and it will remind you, and you will have lots of consultants with you. In fact, in Bombay Stock Exchange, for instance, the compliances we used to do, I was responsible and I know most of those compliance with them. What startups and small companies don't do, which I've seen, and this is going to be a big issue later on, is the ESG related compliances. Because you have to disclose how much you travel, what wrong things you are doing as per the government norms in regard to environment, the social thing, as well as the governance. Governance is almost a very big topic. In fact, the special topic in zone instead of sustainability and environment, because sustainability and environment everyone knows, but in a company, governance is the most thing. It's not a mom and pop up shop when you become a little large. When you are small, it's all right. It's your money. You are going to do it. The moment you become larger, you have to look at compliance.
Since you mentioned that small companies become large, market expansion is something that companies always aim for. The new terminologies. There's first you're a startup and then you become a unicorn and now you become a decacorn. So everybody wants to expand, but one mistake that they often do is they expand too quickly. So what would you advise? What are some of the strategies that companies need to ensure to expand them reach market internationally and domestically?
What actually happens is when you are trying to grow, one is working capital, as I mentioned now. And the second part is many of the startups, as I mentioned earlier, the promoters don't look at building a team and building an in-house expertise. You can hire consultants for everything, but consultants are not your team. Consultants will advise you unless you have a long-term retainership contract with them. Many of the promoters become very silly by giving them contracts of only nature where 2 months, 3 months, or as long as the project is done. I have a feeling the promoters have to get out of that mindset. If you pay a little more and you get good people, you can make a team, and your own team or a long-term consultant will really help you. That's the second part. And the third part is you have to keep up with the markets, the customer. If you ignore your customer, most of the startups and SMEs I've noticed, once they taste a little success, they think that the product is what they have and whoever wants, they can take it or just go wherever they want. They don't realize that the customer taste can change. There could be better competition in the market. I'll give an example. When we talked about, say, financial markets, people didn't realize why the investors were not going. When we started in BSE, to understand the investors are not going because they would come to the market, they would fail most of the time, and then they would leave. They have learned a big lesson. We started investor awareness programs. In fact, I remember we used to have a few thousand, I think 6,000-7,000 events, investor awareness programs all throughout the country a year. Investors, we used to tell them, you only put your surplus disposable income in this. Now, it's a financial market. You have to be very careful. Today, you see the number of investors that are in the market. The second part is we make the procedure cumbersome. The customers don't want it cumbersome. They want all the regulatory work, but they don't want it cumbersome. For example, I remember one of the SMEs that I am still advising. They have a customer base where they take money in advance because they find collecting money afterwards is very difficult. Because the promoter himself was following, people who pay money will, or the other vendors, people who are your customers will not pay. And he said, this is not the way you do. You have to proper credit terms. And you also look at the first order as a trial. When the customer is there with you and long term, there is a level of trust you get. And when you support your customer when he is finding it difficult because they would either be business or otherwise, he will be with you for lifetime. And the SMEs don't understand. And when you expand, if you expand very rapidly without the requisite pieces in the proper place, it's going to take a toll of you. You'll be running around solving issues which should not have happened. And I think planning is a very big thing. Like for instance, I have been a strategy head for almost last 2 decades. And I tell people, if you spend more time planning things, scenario 1, 2, 3, and taking care of it, you will not have much issues. Like for instance, I'll give you an example. In the stock exchange, if you stop your markets even for a brief time, as low as say microsecond, it's a big consequence. So all throughout my tenure, except for once, and that also because of our networking and at the beginning of our tenure there, we had an issue. But otherwise today, you will see that the capital markets don't stop at all. So what you have to do is you have to plan well. I think SMEs require that. And if you leave it to yourself, you are not going to do it. So you have to have an advisor who you pay a little more money, so you listen to his advice. When you get free advice or when you get cheaper advice, you don't listen. So my thinking is SMEs require to get advisors on board, get good independent directors if they can, and listen to what they say.
Absolutely, sir. And you are right on that. So that is what it leads me to the next question. Actually, how do you think as startups and small companies should prioritize mentorship? What is the role that mentorship can have to lead to their success?
I can answer this question with a little bit addition from mine. There are some promoters I've seen, especially those who are ambitious and all. They all want to go alone. They don't even want partners because they've heard horror stories or they had partners who have not worked well with them. I think that's a big mistake. A partner is a mentor who has put money and taken risk. His words of advice and his discussions will be much more fruitful than any other person in the world. So I advise many of my SMEs to take a partner who puts in money and go ahead. Sometimes they ask me to put my money and I say, no, boss. I am not a person who has started with you, who has discussed the idea with you, or who has done something. I am your advisor. Yes, after a certain time working with you, maybe I'll feel that I should put my skin in the game, etc. But will not put the money. So there are partners that you should take. That's the first thing. Second, as you said, that advice, they don't listen. If they don't listen, they are not going to work. So in the mentorship issue, the mentors are there to guide you. But many people see mentors as maybe retired professionals or professionals who think high of themselves. It's not the case. I work with mentors myself. Some of the mentors don't charge me in money, but they charge me in my time. When they require it, I have to do the things for them. It's a give and take. But mentors are required for almost everyone, not only the youngsters, but even seniors. I have been on mentorship to not only students who are passing their MBAs, etc., to startups, not only small companies, but even large companies.
And sir, if I may add,
so I just want to add one more point. Why I'm saying mentors is that's why you've seen the shows like Shark Tank. It's not only investors and money; they want sharks to come because they are ruthless. I can tell you, I worked with some of the sharks, and the sharks, why they behave the way they behave, is because they don't want to treat you like a child. They think you are mature, you understand, and they give their views and they put their money. Of course, their money is much lesser than the promoter's money. So the promoter should tell them straightforward, no, I don't agree, I agree, but don't think it's something which is useless thing. They have experience.
So last but not the least, sir, I'd like to understand from you, which sectors or industries in India do you see having the most growth potential, as far as startups and SMBs are concerned?
First of all, I think India being such a large country, our population, especially the young population, is increasing. So all the consumer areas are available. They all require better food, better education. Uh, you name the service and it is required. And India is looking at that point. The problem is with the startup founders. Many of the startup founders, they want to become, as you said, unicorns, etc. And they don't realize what the customer wants. In the end, the customer is going to eat the normal food that you and I eat. They are not just going to survive on thin air or intangible material. Almost half of the people who come to me are those who want to do something on the net and they want to make huge amount of money. That's not the way it looks like. We have to look at customers, what you can serve, what is your idea, and there requires to be there's a requirement of much more startups which are the physical game. Like for instance, government has given the production linked incentive scheme. I think it's a good scheme. If you're going to produce, the only problem with the PLI scheme is it's meant for large companies. I wish the government gives money to the startup guys who start, because it's a difficult thing to do. The government has lots of schemes. Let me tell you, there's nothing like that government is not supporting. The issue is how many banks are willing to give you a loan of say 1 crore without a collateral. They don't want to take a risk, because banks' mindset is they take deposits and they lend. We require startup funders, and the issue is with the government policy today. There is something called a startup funding winter, you must have heard, and that's been the making of the government. I think that is one thing which I would always request the government to look at it. For example, one of the things is when I start up a company, I say value a share at the face value. I work on it for 1 year, 2 years. I have done lots of work which will be valued a lot. So when I get my first Series A investors or B investors, etc., the valuation is going to be higher. But if I'm going to pay tax on it, and that also at a huge rate, it's almost not going to work. The government looks at it wrongly. Yes, there are people who misuse these things. But you look at the startup, you look at the idea, you can always find out. You can say whether it is a hollow thing, it's a shell company, or it's actually real company. It can be seen very easily. You can make a board where people can do, they can certify, etc. But they have to look at it. Second, world over, why do you think in the US or the Western world, why do you think there are so many startups? Why do people want to go to the Bay Area from India? In fact, if you give me a choice, today, if I were to start up my own company, I would not start up in India. I would establish it in abroad, maybe Europe or US, because even the costs are high. Even the dollar-rupee ratio is not parity, because you can see the ratio. The field is open. And second question, maybe if you look at India, in India, age is considered a bad thing. Whereas abroad, they don't even ask you your age. So in India, I have seen that lots of promoters do not want to hire people who are senior. But we have to look at all these prejudices. Even ladies, girls, I think girls have fantastic ideas. Some of the mentors, their founders are girls. And you can see things which are listed where the ladies are the founders. They have done excellently well. I think women up to now didn't have a chance. They started breaking the glass ceiling. In fact, if I ever start, I will take girls. Of course, I may have to take trusted people, so maybe from the family. But they will not be just for namesake. They will be professionals in their own and they will work. So I think these are the things that the world can look at. And I am sure the government has to look at that the startups are going to become bigger. They are going to grow and give employment. If government does not support them, it's going to be a tough task. And you don't have to believe they are going to, it's a risk capital. As SEBI says, or as we see worldwide, almost 70-80% of the startups are going to fail. The SMEs will remain SMEs and not grow. But that doesn't mean that those 10% or 15% who are going to grow and become large, you should not allow them. I believe if my child or if my company is going to be looked at as likely failure, it's the worst way to look at it. You have to say it has a likely success. And if you look at it that way, I think India is in a very good position. One more thing I just like to add in the end is India still is a capital scarce country. People don't want to come forward and give capital. It's only the banks which have been giving lending and debt is helping us. And the promoters also don't want to use capital the way they want. If they give it at proper value, if they give proper thought to it, we can grow a large amount. Today, if I look at the venture capital and PE industry, for instance, it's a minuscule industry as compared to the Western world or even China and Hong Kong and Singapore. We should not make it restricted. And if I want to add, it's a political point, but things grow on their own. They take their own path. Mumbai has been a financial capital. And though people who are politically aligned would not say much, we should not let Mumbai suffer for want of taking the financial capital to some other place. I would advise the government against it. Let Mumbai grow. When Mumbai grows to a large extent, when it compares itself to London, Dubai, Singapore, at that time we'll require more places like this. Because India is a large country with a large GDP. We should not shortcut Mumbai to something else.
Thank you so much. I really thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our audience will as well.